Hi everyone, Jonathan here again, and as you might have recognised from what's on the table, we're talking Velodogs. If you have recognised that, congratulations. If you haven't, let me explain what on earth Velodog means. Now, these are obviously revolvers, very small, what you might term pocket revolvers, but they're of a particular form, and in this case, a particular caliber or cartridge type that is generally categorised as this Velodog. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's an English, weirdly or not, it's actually an English term or compound word. I say weirdly because these are distinctly French/Belgian in origin. They originated from the Galland gun-making firm around about the 1890s, or 1880s, 90s, they would have been conceived. And I say it's strange that the name is in English because they're conceived on the continent, in Europe, where stray and feral dogs and other animals that might be hanging around in and around cities were a genuine problem if you were out walking, perhaps, and in particular, cycling. The safety bicycle having not that long been invented, people were getting out and about, out of the city, or perhaps having to cycle through the outskirts of a city to get to where they wanted to go, and getting savaged by potentially rabid dogs was not a good day out for anyone. So there was a potential market for a self-defense revolver against animals, and that's where the dog comes in, obviously. And the velo part is short for velocipede, which at that time is what a lot of people in English and other languages were calling the safety bicycle. Now that happened to get shortened as a nickname in France, in particular, as Velo, which I believe still means bicycle in France today. So it's tempting to see Velodog as a name and think, oh, it's half French, half English. But I believe it's kind of multi-language as far as the velo part goes, because velocipede is Latin, or derived from Latin, but the dog part is definitively English. So I like naming of things, as you can probably tell, so I thought I'd just break down the name of this broad category. And it is quite broad. There's a fair bit of variety in how these things were designed. After all you need is a short, stubby, and short in height revolver, a concealed trigger. It's not really, well, concealed is the wrong word. A compact fold-away trigger, so it won't snag on your clothing as you try to draw it out of, say, a pocket. A lot of women were cycling. For the 19th century, quite a liberating thing to be able to get out on a bicycle. So they might have pockets in their skirts, in their dresses. They might be carrying it in some sort of a purse or muff or something, perhaps not on a bicycle. Anyway, it had to be compact. And if you're a gentleman, same applied. Trouser pocket, most likely. So, very little to snag. There's no external hammer. That's not a hammer, that's a safety. So if I gently demonstrate, as gently as I can. So it's a double action only, what we would now call double action only system. Very long, very strong trigger pull, rotates the cylinder. This one's not in great condition. And that click you heard was the internal hammer being pulled back and released. And I mentioned the safety. That's literally just a little lever, push up to block the sear so it doesn't, or block the hammer in fact, so that it won't cock or fire. So down for fire, up for safe. Very long cylinder, you'll notice, and that is to do with this proprietary 5.5mm so-called Velodog cartridge, which was developed by the Galland firm, who had also developed the revolver. So for a while, it was basically this format of revolver, broadly speaking, and the Galland 5.5 Velodog caliber. As the years wore on, other small calibers were used, 2.2 rimfire being an obvious sort of family of calibers that something like this might shoot. Because you're only shooting, sadly, small animals, so it doesn't have to have a huge stopping power. Incidentally, if you are feeling sorry for the dogs, and I don't blame you, a real threat at the time, but no fun necessarily, man's best friend and all that, there were non-lethal loads, believe it or not, for these things. There were cork bullets, there were irritant projectiles or content rather. Salt, I think, or some sort of powder. So something that would make the dog think twice. And even blanks could and would be used just to scare an animal away. So it wasn't all about hurting or killing the animal. Now, I keep talking about France and Belgium and the Galland firm. However, this example that we're showing you here today is actually Spanish, which gives you an idea of how popular this became. It was one of the more successful applications of a very small revolver. So this, we don't actually know who made this one, which is a bit of a shame because it is rather nicely decorated. Nickel-plated, engraving on the frame and on the cylinder. Now what looks like ivory or bone or something is actually ivorine. It's a phenolic resin, a whitish phenolic resin, and because of the sort of grain of that material, it does look a lot like a natural ivory or bone. Now, because of the variety of design of these things, we can't be too definitive, but there are a couple of major ways in which you would have to take these apart. Well, let's talk about loading briefly, because the two things are actually related, or at least they are on some of these. So this Spanish version has a conventional loading gate on the side, so you don't have to take the cylinder out for reloading. You just pop that open, slot in your rounds, and rotate the cylinder to each chamber to fill your cylinder. Now, we haven't looked at this example yet, but this illustrates another sort of subtype of Velodog. This one is actually in 6mm rimfire, so another option chambering. There's no loading gate on this, so how do you load it? Well, as you might have anticipated, as is the case with some other small revolvers, you have to take the cylinder out on this one. So there's a lever. This is a Belgian example, by the way. Again, we don't know who made it. Neither of these are marked. So that lever, you flip up, and that levers forward the barrel, and you just pull it off the rest of the way, and that allows you to slide off the cylinder, load it up with 6 shots, as you can see, slip it back on the axis pin, barrel back on the front, and then lever shut. Now, you're not going to be doing that on a bicycle unless you're extremely skilled, but the idea is you would only need 6 shots for this kind of use anyway. Now, this has mother of pearl, or possibly faux mother of pearl, grips on it. So both of them are relatively fancy, both nickel-plated. This one's not engraved, a little bit more workmanlike, but they're meant to be attractive things to possess, even if you're not shooting them off at random animals or wildlife. They both come with not a holster. Well, one of them comes with a holster. This one, the Belgian example, comes with a very nice chamois leather purse or case. So you would carry it around in this. Now, it's not exactly convenient for rapidly deploying in the event of a dog attack, but it kind of gives you an idea of, this is something meant to be carried around with you, possibly even for self-defense against people. It would scare off a robber, perhaps. Not incredibly lethal, but... And then you could have it, stage it more handily for use on a bicycle, as the name would imply. So what I'm getting at is just because it's called a Velodog doesn't mean that you're either on a bicycle or shooting at dogs. This could be used for a number of different purposes. I would not have relied upon it for self-defense against humans, because we're larger mammals than poor unfortunate dogs that were shot at with these from bicycles and otherwise. The more conventional holster, this is much more practical for use on a bicycle. You could literally wear this on your hip like any pistol holster. It's got a little thumb brake. I mean, this is very, very conventional, and then you'd be able to maybe fumble a draw from this. It's not exactly a quick use item either, but it's a lot more quick to use than a leather purse. Now, if you're wondering about sighting arrangements, nothing too exciting. They're pretty much what you'd expect to see on a 19th century revolver. This one has a little blade on the front, and a gutter on top of the frame. Not too dissimilar from a Colt single-action army setup, really, just smaller and less usable. So it's a groove that terminates in a sort of a hump so that you get something approaching combat-style sights. Well, not really. Maybe Old West gunfight-style sights at best. But more than you might expect for something that is meant to be used at arm's length. You know, you're supposed to just reach out and point shoot at things that are attacking you. So perhaps better sights than we might have expected. And the other one is, because it has an open frame and the removable barrel, same idea, but it doesn't have the gutter, because you can't have a gutter sight when you have an open-topped frame. It just has a tiny little rear notch. But, you know, handgun sights at this time were not great across the board. So I've alluded to a sort of potential self-defense use, not recommended. Also not recommended would be assassination. Now, believe it or not, it was a pistol of this type that was used in an assassination attempt on Spanish King Alfonso VIII. This was in 1906, I believe. So it failed, and he reigned for some years later. But it's perhaps appropriate that we have a Spanish Velodog on the table, because it does link in quite nicely with that little snippet from history, that someone actually was prepared to try and assassinate somebody important with something as weak as this. Admittedly, being an anarchist, he also had a bomb, which was the primary weapon for that attack. But the attack failed, and I don't believe he ever fired the revolver, but when he was arrested, he had one of these on him. Now, these things were made for longer than you might think. So popular in the 1890s, 1910s, still made up until the Second World War. In fact, it was probably only the outbreak of war in 39, rolling into 40, that finished these things off. It really disrupted the market for, well, all sorts of consumer goods, including firearms. And by the time the war had ended, there was not really a market anymore for these things. The big cycling craze had maybe died down or achieved a level where people knew where not to cycle. And so that kind of marketing meme fell away. Small pocket revolvers in small rimfire calibers were still available, but they were no longer the thing that they once were. And today they are collector's items, museum pieces, that sort of thing. If you want more on this, I recommend you check out Jerry Friedman's website, Velodogs.com. It's a nice, easy one to remember. Lots of information and photos of different examples. He goes into quite a bit of detail there. Thanks as always for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. We're here every week, and you can also play along over on social media before the video actually drops. That's on Facebook and Instagram. We have a Twitter account as well that you might want to look at. Our website is pretty important if you actually want to come and visit us, because we are open at our 3 sites. So I hope you are able to visit us. If you're not, we'll see you again next time. Thanks very much.